Well, welcome everybody. I am Amanda Bickerstaff. I am the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. This is part of our AI Launchpad series of webinars. Really excited to have you here today. As always, we want you to get involved, and thank you so much for everyone that's already starting to chat and put their where they're from in the chat. But we want this to be an opportunity for you to learn from each other as well. One of my favorite parts about this webinar series that are now on 15 or 16, I've lost count, is to have the community that's been built around what we do. So please take the time to chat, to ask questions, to have share resources. You're a learning community together and a global one at that. So please take that time. Also, like I'd love you to keep like as we get into the prompt library and prompt engineering, I want you to try this out on your own. This is meant to be as interactive as possible. I may not be able to see you, but I know that this is an opportunity for us to learn together. As I said, this is part of our AI Launchpad series. And so we're doing prompt engineering today. Next week, I'm doing top mistakes educators make with AI, which will be kind of common mistakes that we see through the work that we do, both Harry Pickens and I, and then how to combat that. And then we're going to be doing a session in November on evidence of learning, which is a really nice counterpoint to the technology aspect. And we'll be adding more. In fact, please, everyone, if you can do our final feedback form and give us more ideas about what kind of webinars you'd like to see, that would be really great. And so usually we kind of start where we're talking, like kind of getting right into it, but we're going to take a little bit of a step back and do something technical. So if you were with me last week, you know that I don't like to spend more than 5 to 10 minutes in the professional development on the technical aspect. But I think this is really important because what we're talking about today is like prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is a brand new field. And it's not one, it's both what we experience through chatbots, but also what's happening behind the scenes. So if you're using a chatbot directly, you are prompting that chatbot. If you're using something like a Magic School, or you use Jasper AI to do copywriting, or you're using all these different applications, prompt engineering is happening in the background. So we're going to start with a little bit of AI vocabulary. And so when we think about what we have here is that we've got a couple of things we should think about. So traditional AI or classical AI is going to be really about more of this kind of pattern recognition. And so an approach where machine learning is when a computer learns from data and then makes decisions or predictions based on the pattern it identifies. And so if you think about this, you might have been using tools like predictive text, or we've had adaptive testing, or there have been other types of tools like writing tools or Grammarly that were able to learn from lots of data and then apply patterns. And so it was pretty much like very, very structured. There are algorithms that were leading that, which is more traditional classical AI. And then you add some pieces above that, like natural language processing, which is how machines are going to be able to read, understand, and generate human language. So that ability to say type, 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 and they can understand that I am writing words and that words form sentences, and that there is the ability to create meaning from those words. And so that's a really important component of how the AI models work. And then the next piece is when we talk about large language models. So large language model is essentially what ChatGPT is. Okay, and so these are these big models that are trained on a whole host of information, like the internet. And so GPT 3.5 was trained on text only, and GPT-4 was trained on text and images. And so they're able to like take all this huge amount of data, and they generate human-like text based on their training. So like how they were trained in the sense of what they ingested, how humans were part of it. They actually rate the output, the parameters that are built in, like all little rules in which it follows, and then the way that you prompt it. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. Then what we see here is that large language models like ChatGPT are considered to be generative AI, which is that we talk a lot about that, which is that idea that this creates new content. So it's not quite machine learning anymore, where it's very about prediction and patterns. Like it's much more about the ability to create new content, like music or images or blogs or students' essays, which we hear a lot about, is that it's able to do that through its training. And it's something that we're seeing more and more interesting ways in which this is set to transform the way that we teach, the way that students learn, the way that technology works in general. The other two pieces I want to talk about before we move on is the idea of temperature. So if we all right now collectively, there are 121 people now on this webinar, all went to ChatGPT right now and entered one prompt, like what are you, or what's the weather, or is Taylor Swift on tour? What's going to happen is the responses are all going to be either slightly different or very different. And that's because the model is actually designed to have temperature, or it's a parameter that creates the creativity, the randomness. And so it means that you can ask the same thing multiple times, even in the same context window, that same window, and you're going to get different outputs. And the reason why that's important is that when we think about prompt engineering, even if you have the best prompt that worked one day, it may not work in that same day. It may not work at all the next day, because it's going to be designed to have that creativity. And you can see that if you ever use Bing, it actually allows you to pick a creative mode where it really goes very, very high temperature, or a like boring mode, essentially. I don't think it's called boring, but a mode in which it's not very creative. I think they call it precise, that has a low temperature. And then the final thing is, if you've been here before, you know that hallucinations are a big part of models, and there's not any tool that's been based on these generative AI models are going to have hallucinations in which the model generates something that isn't accurate, but can be very, very convincing in its inaccuracies. And I see that, like, so further kind of at this point, where this is a little bit more technical than we usually do, but I think that it would be like, this is the idea that we're coming together, and we hope you watch this again if you need to, and we're going to present more information, but I think it's important for us to contextualize this information, because it's something in which a prompt is actually really important to understand that you are a computer scientist. For the first time, you're a computer scientist, even if you've had no training, because that's what you're doing, is you're actually creating with language technology and outputs. And so we're going to look at how that works in just a little bit more technical, and then we'll get to the more practical piece. But the idea of how this works is that every time you type into ChatGPT or Bard or Bing, what you're going to see is that you're going to create these tokens. And so every sentence, like this sentence here, it has multiple tokens. And so that's where pretty much, it's not every word, but for every 1,000 words, there's about 700, or sorry, every 750 tokens. Oh man, every 750 words, there are about 1,000 tokens, because sometimes what you're going to see is that they break up. So misspelled words will have actually smaller tokens, and then whole words will have their own token. And so the reason why this is important is that not every model can ingest, like enormous amounts of tokens, but it's also how probability works. Because remember, these are not things, I'm going to put this on a pillow, but these tools are not thinking tools. They are predicting and computing tools. And the way that they work is that you take, words like we just saw, and they become tokens, and they get turned into numbers, which is how computers work, is they work with numbers. And then based on that, they go into the large language model, and then it predicts the next word. So in this case, if I put in this, like, please complete this sentence, the sky is. The way this would work is that would now lead to probability of what the next word is. And so in this case, the next word is most likely blue, and it's going to give you that as an output. And this is how these tools work. And it's able to do this at really like amazing scales, but it's doing it word by word. And so that's why sometimes it can even make up words. And so it can do things that are pretty crazy at times as well, because the probabilities can be off, or it can be a little bit confusing. And especially if you're not thinking about your prompting techniques, it can lead to things that are not going to have a very good output. So now, like, why is this? So we're going to jump into the hows and whys and whats of this. And so this is going to get us to the meat of actually getting started and thinking about prompt engineering. And so the first thing that we're going to look at is the why. So the way you prompt a large language model affects its output. So if it's like all these words are becoming tokens and becoming, they're going to go and they're going to become a text array, and then it's going to go there and it's going to become a probability. That's really complicated. So I don't want us to necessarily get stuck on that. Like, these models can be very complicated, but the idea of this is to really inherently kind of situate you all in thinking that it actually matters what words you use. It matters what orders you use this in. It matters in which, how you're actually formatting the request, and even what you do after you request. And so it's just really important that is why you can't just type in, a sentence and expect a great output. Like, you actually have to put some time and thought into this. So that's the why. The what of it means that it actually is something in which you can become a good prompter. And like, to become a good prompter means that you follow some like actual prompting techniques, which we're going to talk about today, including something called priming. You can provide the right examples using the right phrasing. And even what you do after that initial prompt is all going to be part of getting to the best output possible, which is something that we all want. We all want to use these models to give us something really meaningful for our practice or just for our students. So this is why it's so important to learn these skills. And then the final piece is like, now let's go and do it. So we have, there are tons of prompt frameworks. If Vera is here, she has something that is great, which is it's called Craft. We have the 5S. There are all kinds of different models. But really what we're going to do is talk about a way to get into the habit of asking good questions and creating good prompts. So that's the starting place. But because we remember talking about temperature, is that there's going to be creativity built into the responses. So it means you're going to need to experiment. And that means that you need to be patient and and resilient in the experiment. And we saw that, I think it was one of our very first webinars where I was showing our rubric prompt live. And we had that prompt mess up 4 different times in 4 different ways, which is a good example of like, even, live on a webinar, these things don't always work as expected. And so it's going to rely on that experimentation and that patience. And so these are the ways in which we're going to do this. So we're going to think about like how we set up a prompt. We're going to show you a framework, and then we're going to actually think about how you work with this together today. And so we have this 5S framework that we have, and Dan's going to drop this in the channel. We have 2 versions, one for teachers and one for students. And I'm going to walk this through in terms of what this framework and how we designed it. And so the idea of this is that there are 5 steps you can take. The first is that you want to always set the scene. And so it's really important to think about what you want the chatbot to respond as. And so if it is, the training is the entire internet, it means that if you ask a very open-ended question, it doesn't necessarily know where in that, like how to respond and what you want it to respond as. So we call that priming, but setting the scene. So if you're writing a STEM lesson plan, if you're doing an English lesson plan, if you want to be a historical figure, you want to make sure that you give the chatbot that context. So what role or expertise or the environment it should use to guide its output. So that's a really important first step. So what is this, like you want it to be taking on like Isaac Newton, or you want it to take on the guise of Shakespeare, an expert, or whatever this may be. You always want to start there. The next is you want to be as specific as possible. So you want to create this very specific, like a lot of specificity and clearly defining the task and providing details or examples on what you would like included. So if you're doing a lesson plan, we don't want to just say create a lesson plan, but we want to say use a 5E model. We want to say the length. We want to say it has to include these 5 things. If you're asking it to create an objective, you can even say frame it as students will be able to, or another version that's appropriate to your context. But the more specific you can be and providing examples is going to help with that output being more appropriate to what you want. The next piece is simplifying your language. If you're spending a whole host of time on doing this work and creating the very best prompt, you're going to actually miss out on where the magic happens, which is really using your expertise and continuing to prompt after the initial prompt to refine and get to the output that you want. And so we really want you to be conversational, simplified, but not actually create something that has like a whole bunch of jargon, but something that, remember, this is about probability. So the more probable you're, like the way it's framed, the easier it is to understand, the easier it is to give you something back that's going to be of use to you. The next piece is structuring the output. So make sure if you want it to be in bullets, if you want it to be in a chart, if you want it to include specific components, that's going to be really important for this as well. And so we love, you'll see, we'll look at a couple of examples where we show actual, this is what we want included, and giving it very specific details about what structure and format it should be in. And then the final piece is, like I said, this is where the magic happens. There's 2 pieces of magic. One is that you are the expert and that you're going to be using these chatbots to get to something that matters for you, especially when you're using it one-on-one. But the other piece is that your ability to keep prompting and refining and sharing feedback, let's say that this isn't quite right, or I want this to change, is really going to be a great way to get to something that's going to be of a lot more merit for you. And so we want you to think about this as we get started. And I'm actually going to call on a special guest, which is really exciting. So Callie is our prompt kind of expert now. And so Callie, I want to introduce you. So Callie and I met, oh man, Callie, 3 or 4 months ago, where Kelly is a transitioning teacher and was looking to get into ed tech. We met at a networking event in New York City. Shout out to New York City, New York Ed Tech Meetup. And we had this conversation, and at this early stage, I was like, "Hey, Kelly, like, I'd love you to come on. Our prompt library is something I really like really think has merit, but it's really hard for me to keep up with. So why don't you introduce yourself, Kelly, and talk about what you thought?" So it's been pretty technical, and I think this is more technical than we usually get. But like, how did you get to a point from where I first talked to you about this, where you had no experience of AI, to like where you now are building prompts pretty much every week?
For sure. Yeah, so exactly like you said, I'm a former educator. My background's in early childhood education. We met at an ed tech meetup, and I was very excited just to get going with anything. And yes, I had never used ChatGPT before or any form of large language model or any form of generative AI. I knew what ChatGPT was, and that was the extent of it. So when you first were talking about all of this, I was like, this is not for me. But you were so passionate about it, and so it made me excited about it. And now making the prompts is definitely the most exciting part of my work with you and AI for education. Um, yeah, I mean, do you want me to walk through the process of what I do when, when I'm thinking about the prompt,
Yeah,
or
definitely. Well, so let's talk.
realize I
Let's take a step
skipped a
back. Like,
lot, but
yeah, no, it's
yeah.
good. And so, how long does it take you to do a prompt that's like? So we'll look at our prompt library, but we go pretty intense. We have like a prompt that is one that you can use, one that's an example that you can plug in, and then some examples
Yeah.
of how to remix for yourself. So, how long does it take you to do that usually?
Probably about 30 minutes. I will say that sometimes I spend a lot of time sort of thinking about, the theme that I want to go with, because I think that that's the most fun part. So, like I said, my background's early childhood and I've only taught pre-K, but that's my time to sort of think maybe I want to be, an AP US history teacher in 10th grade, or a fifth grade French teacher or a seventh grade health teacher. And so, I have fun with that. And so I'll really take some time thinking about that. So maybe other people could do it in less time, but maybe they're having less fun with it. And then, from there, thinking about exactly. So sometimes I do have to do research. Your background is in science, so you probably have to do less research if you're writing a prompt about a ninth grade bio teacher. But I don't remember my bio, as well as you might. And so sometimes I literally have to research, what is mitosis if I'm going to write a prompt about, creating an assessment based around students learning mitosis. But again, once I've done all of that, then I think about the wording. We have a specific framework, that we've developed, priming the chatbot. You are an expert teacher, specifically, the lens that we want the chatbot to think through. And the wording, as you've said, really matters, the order of the wording. There was one that I did recently that was actually through an early childhood lens, where we were talking about a kindergarten class learning patterning. And I wanted ChatGPT to produce patterning in the real world. But the way that I had worded real world, it was giving me examples that were, ways that I could use real materials in the classroom, which would be great for a teacher. If I were still in the classroom, that would be great. I could use candy or animal figurines, but I wanted to literally have it give me ways that I could point out in the real world patterns. So then I had to change the wording, still using real world, and then it eventually gave me animal stripes, stripes on houses or fence posts. So you do have to have patience, as you said, and be able to sort of, now I could see exactly. I was like, oh, it's this, wording of real world. But maybe when I started, that might have taken some time. But with practice, it's only been a couple of months, and so you really can learn it very quickly.
It's great. And I think just to kind of call out a couple of things that when we build these, we're doing like the most, right, guys? Like we're doing the most because we want you to be able to use it and we want it to be really usable. And I think that this is where it gets really interesting because it takes us 30 minutes or maybe a little bit more to kind of come up with the idea and to try it on multiple chatbots. But for you, like it's going to be a lot easier to take this and like either start with our prompt library and remix it or to use the frameworks to
100%.
do that. And I think that that's where the power really comes in here is that it is something in which like, we're giving you like even with just a couple of changes, it can really radically change the outputs. And that's why we spend so much time on this. But you getting into that habit or teaching your students about it, it should just make you really much more efficient. So what we're going to do is, Callie, can you bring up your screen and we're going to look at an example that we did recently. This is actually, so it was quite funny. Callie and I were talking before this and we first started, I think like when you came on, we had like 30 prompts and now we have 75. And Callie was like, we have them all. What could we possibly create? And what we've created a
That
whole
was
bunch
what I
more.
thought. I looked at them and I was like, okay, you have rubrics, you have assessments, I feel like you did it. And then the more we talked, I was like, oh wait, reference letters. Oh wait, this. Oh wait, parent teacher conferences. The
There are a
possibilities
lot of
are endless.
applications. Exactly. We like I think every once in a while I just like dump like 10 ideas on Callie because I have the people that I talk to and the things that I see we bring in. And so Callie, there's a question from Carl.
Yeah,
Do you use AI to help with the prompting process, reverse
I
prompt
do.
engineering?
I do. I didn't at first, and then the more that I got familiar with it and got comfortable with it, now I do actually. And you'll see, so in the one that I was going to pull up, that's a great question. So, can I answer your question while going through this one? So this was one that I did for an oral exam. And this was close to my heart because I was a French student and I did have oral exams. So, really put me back in the day. So this was the question. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
You are an expert teacher, so that's the priming, skilled in designing and administering student assessments, again, part of the priming. Create a 6-question. So when we have this on the prompt library, these are blank parts that you can insert in, and this is part of the testing so that, when you do this for yourself, it's all the kinks are worked out, so it's really easy for you. Blah, 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 AP French, they're studying Candide by Voltaire. So then it spat out this. Immediately, the first problem that I noticed was when I took advanced French, the questions were not in English. And, fair point, I didn't specify that. So I went back, I read through, the questions were fine, but I went back and then re-specified the exam should be in French, but just in case, provide an English translation. I went back, it was great. Everything's in French, but then like you asked, Carl, was it? So then I went back because we do have a section, make the prompt work for you. So then I went back and used ChatGPT. What do you think? How long do you think it'll take the students to answer this question? And when I first started doing this, I was really doing everything like, what do I think that people will want, when they're using this? But honestly, if you're interacting with the chatbot, why not use it to help you? And honestly, I found that it's really been helpful. So, I went back, here's the time, now I can't remember if I used that as part of the make the prompt work for you. Maybe I said, consider the time that, the students may take for each section. How can I help my students prepare for the exam? So this was definitely one of the, make this prompt work for you. Think about how you can help the students and ask the chatbot how it can help you, because these were great. Read and discuss the text, blah, blah, blah. A lot of these you probably would have already done for yourself, practice discussions. Great. Obviously, it's an oral exam. You're going to be, speaking to do that. But maybe some of these, like a mock oral exam or real life connections. And then also another thing is, okay, if that struck your fancy, real life connections, you can go back and say, okay, regarding number 9, can you, elaborate on that? Give me some examples of real life connections. Some of these might not be applicable or might be some things that you've already thought of. That's fine. The idea is that, Amanda talks a lot about having it be a thought partner. It's not going to solve everything, and it's not going to, always have unique ideas. It's just to sort of get you thinking and be additive in that sense. And then this was an interesting thought as well. Can you help with pronunciation? I wasn't sure if it would, and it did a phonetic pronunciation, which I thought was kind of cool. Discuter, it was pretty good actually. It wasn't exactly realistic that you would use this. I think that someone teaching at that level would probably be able to pronounce this, and this wouldn't really be, you know, the best way of using this, but it's good to know that it was able to do that, and pretty accurately, I thought. And then just some other, what might other things be to consider if I were doing this. Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I definitely do.
Yeah, so Janet actually had a great question about how confident are you in the translation to other languages? And we talk about this a lot. This is not ever, sorry, I got it coming back. This is never where you want to end ever. And so like this is a great starting place though that you use if you are a expert like in the sense of you are building this out but you need help getting started, then this is where you can at least get you may not have read Candide that closely in a while, or you're wanting to get like an extra set of eyes. So I think it's definitely something in which what we want to do is like have it be something in which it's always going to be a brainstorming partner, a place to get started. But especially with languages, it does a pretty good job of basic, like very kind of more common languages, but it's going to do worse as the language becomes less common. But again, that's pretty much for everything though with ChatGPT and other tools is that you're going to see, remember, it's a predictive like a probability engine. And so the less it knows about that through the training it has, the worse the outputs are going to be. So this is just a good example. The reason why I like this one is that I think before we started, we never would have thought that we would get to something this close, like this complicated, multiple languages, structure, output with one 3 sentence prompt. And so we wanted to show this one because it's a good example of how the more that you do this and the more expertise that you build, the more kind of interesting, unique, novel applications you can use. And so in terms of like Harry's question, hi Harry, he's on our webinar next week. And so the idea that like, we don't actually use ChatGPT to build the prompts. And I know that some people will do reverse prompting where it'll ask you to do that reverse prompting. We also don't use that's something like prompt perfect. And so in the sense of that's where that's giving you like the perfect prompt, because those prompts tend to be very, very large and they often tend to work better with the non-free version. So we try to create something that's understandable that gets you to like 80%. And that's going to be something that's unique based on our approach. Because it is something, if you, Callie, do you want to change over to the prompt library? We've
Yes.
created this tool in 2 ways. It's not only for you to go and be able to have a starting place, but it's also a andragogical or pedagogical tool because the way it's structured, like you can clearly tell we're educators because the way it's structured is it gives you a thing that you can change if you want to go to maybe unit or lesson
Yep.
objectives. Um, and then what we have the prompt. This is a very simple one that can be done. We've got the example, that's the scaffold. And then we've got the make the prompt work for you, which is the creativity. And so the reason why this is created this way is that it is designed to be about building as much AI literacy as it is about the perfect output. Because we know that there's no output that's ever going to be perfect the first time, because your context and expertise is absolutely key in that piece. And that's why we like this ability to do this work. And so I'm just going to answer a couple more questions before we go on. So ChatGPT compared to Bard, I think for something like this, ChatGPT is going to be significantly better. We use Claude for some things, like we use Claude for more communication. We use Claude that does better on larger context windows where you have a bigger piece of text you want to parse. We have one, Kelly, do you want to bring up the version, the prompt that we did that you need to actually upload a piece of content?
Yes.
while we're doing that. And then, so in the case of just one more question from Hope. So definitely the ability to reasonably predict time. ChatGPT, like even though Callie asked it, that didn't get into the final prompt because it does a pretty poor job. It actually can't. It's again, it's predicting. So we just like it was more of like kind of seeing the thing. So we definitely do not we don't do that work. Like if you want to come off share what we look, that's okay, Callie.
Yeah, I don't remember
All
what it
good. Don't want to give anybody like I get car sick a bit.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry.
no, you're perfect. And
Let
so,
me
but this
find
idea
it
though
off
that like
share.
while we're doing this, we're actually kind of navigating the edges, so to speak, Hope. So I always think it's really funny because, some of our prompts will be like, it's supposed to be 5 to 10 minutes, and then it'll give you something that's like a full lesson. So again, it requires your expertise. And that's why it really can get to the point where if you keep doing in that refining piece, it's going to get better and better. And so everything that happens after that first prompt is part of this process. So I'm going to actually, while we're doing this, yeah, to Aaron's point, like the timing, I always love it. We have a 90-minute, 4 90-minute lessons, and it's going to be like 3 hours in some schools and 30 minutes in other schools and other spaces. So that's actually something that messes up quite a bit, but it would definitely not be a use case for prompt engineering that we would use all that much. So I'm just going to open back up the kind of resetting this because we also have a version of this for students that does the same thing. But I just want to kind of call out, and like we're just going to do a bit of a repetition by learning, is that when Callie shows you how she creates it, she's always going to prime, always. We do not have a prompt in our library that doesn't have priming. That is cutting the pie, so to speak, and making it a smaller amount of a smaller amount of knowledge, so to speak, of training that's going to navigate. You got the specificity, which we saw about like the more specific that you are, the better the output will be. Callie, it's not a very particularly challenging piece of language. It's very simple and it uses keywords like oral exam, and it's using a very kind of common technique that's going to be in a lot of the training data. Structuring the output to have both English and French as an example, and then providing that feedback and keeping doing it is really going to be where you're going to see the most value. So I'm gonna actually go to our
I
prompt
found it if you
library.
want to go
You
to
did?
that.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to go back and do
Okay.
that?
Yeah. Share screen.
So Claude is so Claude we only build for free versions. So there are, this is not mega prompting, this is not, which are really great. These are not like crazy complicated prompts that ask you questions. But what we wanted to do is make sure this is equity based and this is accessible by everyone. So the only tool right now, well, not the only tool, but the most commonly used tool right now where you can upload a document and have it actually be part of the response is going to be Claude. And so we have this example. You want to come back up and show this? This is a summarized text example. And you could cut and paste text in. This happens a lot. And so like if you wanted to cut and paste an article or a YouTube transcript or something on those lines, you can do that with ChatGPT or Bing or Bard. But what we want to do is show an actual example. So let's go to Claude and then we can like pull up. Yeah, you're gonna let me do it. Okay, so we're gonna go to Claude. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna come to, can you see my prompt library? So I'm gonna go to, this is summarized text, which is gonna be in, I think it's in our lesson planning. It's also in the students one as well. So I'm just gonna do summarize. We have a lot of prompts now. So
It's hard for me to find.
we have 75 prompts. It got a little bit big, guys. But here, let's do summarize. Yep, there we go. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pull this prompt. Remember, this is the example that you can change for your own piece. Here are the examples of how you make two. We actually have identified Claude or ChatGPT 4 because there's only two that you can do that with. I'm going to go to Claude. So if you've not used Claude, Claude is a tool that's been designed by Anthropic, and it's a human first approach. But what you can see is right there, you can add files and you can add a series of files. So if I put this in, you're an expert student with expertise in summarizing and pulling out important sections of a test. So it's going to be, I'm going to go and I'm going to find gonna go and do text, blog on building a website. So I'm going to go to this and I'm going to say how to build a website, a beginner's guide. And so I'm going to I'm going to take this, and I could do something where there are plugins where I can do this and I'll go, hey, like, um, take this text. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut and paste this into a document. Sorry, that's going to give everyone whiplash. But I'm just going to do this here. I'm going to put it into a document. And you need always remember that these are important to create, to think about copyright and those types of things. We don't want it to necessarily be used and publish this, but if you wanted to help this and summarize this text, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it as a export to a PDF, which it works really well with PDFs, which is nice. And I'm going to put this in, export it, and then now I'm going to go back to Claude. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this document. You can see my slides for today. Did it? It didn't download. Hold on a second, everyone. So let me just come off sharing. But while I'm doing this, like what I'm doing is I'm going to take this text that hopefully it actually hold on. Just want to make sure export to PDF and then next. Technology, guys, super fun. Replace. Okay, so it should be there now. One moment. I'm going to share my screen again. And going to go here. There we go, entitled to. And I'm going to upload, and so it's uploading it. And so now what it's done is that it's building websites. We want it to read the text. We want it to summarize the text and identify the main ideas, steps, and key vocabulary. So this is a quick and dirty version of this. But what we're going to see now is that this is a step-by-step. It's got covers choosing a blogging platform and domain name, selecting a template, adding important pages like about and contact. It gives you main ideas from the text. So pick a specific niche, choose a template that fits your blog style, etc. The key steps, which are going to be similar to that, and key vocabulary. And we could use this to actually have it define the vocabulary as we keep prompting. And so this is an example of like a very structured prompt that gave it, so it gave us back, it summarized the document. We can double check it, but that's something to see. It's then identify the main ideas, the steps, and key vocabulary. And so, and then it did it in bullet points. And so this is something that's been structured. So this is an example of like using another free version. And so Rochelle says like TLDR, use that a lot. But in the case like, this is something in which it does a good job of creating a space, which is not always easy to do, which is kind of summarizing. Let's say that you have English language learners, or you have students that need extra scaffolding, that you want to be able to kind of have an opportunity to have something a little bit simpler. This is a great example of doing that. I know that Claude isn't available all over the world. So what we can do is we can take this text and upload it in chunks, potentially with other tools. You can also get around it with, so Poe uses Claude and others. You can use PlayLab or other tools to create your own. But it definitely is something that is a good space. And I know this is about equity as well. So I wish we could make this publicly available, but you're going to see that there are also plugins and websites that you can do this work. But this is a great example of even like a YouTube video that you want to create a transcript for. And I just see that Vincent just said on a similar, he does a transcript with his recorded classes, and then Claude helps him make a mind map for his students to reflect back on. And that's going to get easier and easier with multimodal GBT that's coming out. So that's really cool. Thank you, Vincent, for sharing that. So I'm going to go and we're going to kind of wrap up this section with some really interesting new things. So I'm going to actually, I know that Callie and I, we try to keep it as simple as possible, so it's replicable as possible, but there's some cool things that are coming. They're not the most reliable because the models actually change quite a bit over the course of like the usage of this, but there are a couple of areas in which you can get to my documents. Well, that's like I'm off share before you guys see my document. Nothing in there, but like, but I want to make sure that like we're pulling this up. So let me pull back there we go. Here is our slides. There's some kind of interesting new techniques. And so that you might not be aware of these, but there are some techniques of actually using some phrasing and some words in your prompting that academic papers have found to be successful in improving the output. So things like be concise is actually a lot of, because this is really expensive. So remember, prompt engineering is you creating with technology through your prompting, but also the tools that you're using are prompting in the background. And so it can get very expensive. So if you have a really long prompt and a lot of like a really long set of words, it costs a lot more money. Those tokens are like you actually have like you pay per token, so to speak. And so the more concise an output is, the better it is for the cost of it. So this is something in which you can create something that is supposed to have higher value or be better output. There's a new one that's been shown is that take a deep breath is another example. So actually asking it to slow down has been and take a deep breath has shown to have an impact on the quality of output. And so I've tried this a bit with our prompts. I haven't seen enough of it yet to add it, but this is something I think about a lot and I use in my own kind of prompting. The next one is to ask it to ask you questions. So Harry and a couple other people are like, well, how do you do like reverse prompting? Like Carla asked as well. So you can do something like this where you say, I'm writing a lesson on, seventh grade recycling. What do you need to know to help write that lesson? So ask me questions, and then it will provide you the questions that it needs. And then you say, okay, take all those answers and then create that lesson. So that's something you can also do to try. And another really interesting one, and we'll like these are all like been published, which is really fascinating, is this idea of this is important for my job. So like actually like saying that this is important and like having an emotional kind of part of this. It says like this is really important for me. This is something that's gonna make or break my job. I could get a raise, like all these things, but making like an emotional plea actually can create a better quality of output. And then the last one is explain your answer. So actually having it explain the answer that it gave you also can supposed to help with the quality of output. So these are kind of other prompting techniques. Like we believe in like we're very comfortable in this where you're doing this, but if you want to kind of try and see, so like this could be a really fun lesson for your teachers if you're working in a PD or your students where you're like, okay, we're going to try these different pieces and compare and contrast. Does it really like help to ask it, take a deep breath, and how funny does that, like what does that mean? And like having like kind of this engagement piece where you can see like how this works, knowing that like these models change quite a bit and they don't always work very as expected, but they can be pretty fun. And so the last thing I'm going to show before we go on is before we kind of go to questions is something that also can really help with prompting. And so we want you to use our prompt library if it's a starting place. If you have great prompts, send it to us. We'll work with you to create one. We have plenty of prompts on the website that have been supported by other people. But if you go to ChatGPT, there's a thing that's not super new, but it's relatively new in the sense of a way to get better outcomes. So, we have ChatGPT and I have both versions. Kelly only has 3.5 right now because we really want this again to be accessible. But if I go down here and I go to my settings, there are a couple of things that I can do, which is I can do custom instructions. I can do settings. If you're ever using something for sensitive pieces, you can clear all chats. You can create, you can make sure that you can turn off chat history and training. I suggest that if you're not going to be like coming back all the time, or you want to use this in a private and protected way. But then also there is the opportunity to set a custom instruction. And so customize your interactions with ChatGPT by providing specific details and guidelines for your chats. Whenever you edit your custom instructions, they'll take effect in all new chats you create. Existing chats won't be updated. Okay. So this is where you can actually put in, I am a high school biology teacher.
We're only seeing the slide.
Oh, okay, sorry. Oh, dang it. Again. Oh man. I like how like Aaron yelled at me, Amanda. So you can't actually yell at me, but luckily Callie's here to yell at me, which is good. I love that. That's so funny. Okay. Can everyone see this now? Okay.
Yes.
So this is a custom instruction. So funny. You know what, guys? Technology. It's easy, just webinars with, a couple hundred people in it. So it totally works out everything perfectly. But I'm going to go back here. So at the bottom, you're going to see custom instructions. And then what you can do is this is where you can enter. It's only going to affect that comes after. But I'm a high school biology teacher in the Bronx that uses a 5E model, Common Core state standards, and GSS standards. And what I can do is now I could even put in here, like I use this output or structure for my lessons where I can cut and paste it in. I can put in so much information about me. And then what that means is that the way we prime is suddenly now, if I'm using this primarily for teaching or for instructional design or for students, what it will do is it will cater its output to get better instruction. So it's like always priming it for you. And so in this case, like you can say, and like, and if you want to go from like teacher world to I want to be the best travel planner, or I'm going to be whenever, however you use this tool, or financial modeler, you can do that as well. Then you can also do how you would like it to respond, how formal or casual, how long or short should the answers be, how do you want to be addressed? So like Amanda, or you can be something where like I don't know, you can be a superhero, could be a superhero, and then should you have opinions or remain neutral to like what you're doing. And so in this case, if you're using this in a classroom, what you can do is that this is going to be something that you can actually create and prime before you go in, where you don't want it to be formal. You want it to be very sure of its answers. You want it to remain neutral. You want it to avoid certain types of pieces. You want it to introduce you as Miss Bickerstaff, or if you taught in the Bronx, Miss. I never had a last name in 3 years of teaching there. So the idea here, though, is that you can actually go in, and it's only going to, in fact, your chat's going from that moment. But this is an example of more kind of advanced prompting that you can do. It's readily available, but we often miss it because so much is happening. And so this is just an important way to start thinking about how you can continue to do this work, and that you're going to be in a position in which you can make this work even more for you. Because the ultimate goal here, all of this, like everything that we do at AI for Education, the ultimate goal is to make your lives easier as teachers, to create spaces in which you can personalize learning, that you can support your students, that you can build AI literacy. But like really, like the idea of this is how do you make this work for you in a way that is meaningful and tactical? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of come back and like all these slides and everything that we have on the website, Dan's going to actually put in the feedback form for today. Callie's, we couldn't figure out the QR code, but you can have Callie's QR code as well for LinkedIn. Connect with us there. But the ultimate goal, again, is that when we think about prompt engineering, it is you are a computer scientist. Callie, you are a computer scientist. And we have actually had conversations where Callie has not believed she's a computer scientist. And I have to say, you know more about creating these prompts than most people. And this is the opportunity to really create spaces in which you are actually able to create something with technology in ways that have never been possible. And so everything that you think about is really going back, and it sounds silly, but like just something as simple as this piece, and then using our prompt library or your own expertise will really help you get to a better output. So I'm going to stop there. And for those of you that have to go, I know we try to get you guys out at the 45-minute mark. We're a couple of minutes behind. And I know we have people from all over the world. So please like go chat, go to sleep or whatever you need to do. But if you want to stay and chat for a little bit, we'll stay on and answer a couple questions. If you have any. If you don't, we really appreciate you. You guys are the reason why we do this. Like we want you to hopefully find value. And thank you for sticking with me with a little bit more technical at the beginning. It's definitely more technical than we usually get. But yeah, if you have any questions at all, please let us know. But maybe Kelly, I'll just ask, like, what is the favorite, like when you think about the prompts that we created, what do you think is the one that's your favorite?
I think the apples to apples one, which I hate to say is another French one, which honestly has nothing to do with it being French. But it was just so different. I think, like we said, when we started and you were showing me the ones that you already had, they were very straightforward, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are the ones that's like the bread and butter, the ones that are, clicked on the most. But I had never imagined or conceptualized that that could be something that, that those are the kind of things that as educators, the fun things that you want to do with your students, because you want them engaged and you want them learning the material and remembering it. But I would have never thought that a chatbot could help you create something like that. And it really did. If anybody, knows that game, it did a really great job. And the same with the Jeopardy one, which was not a language one. I believe that one was either a history or a science one. The science ones are really easy to conceptualize as well. But yeah, same thing, really fun framework for a game. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is where, like with multimodal ChatGPT coming out, like the apples to apples game, you could actually like have it build an image to go with the text, and like even have the text. So Dolly 3 is coming out, which is going to do a better job of creating and refining, and that you can include text. And I think that that's where you take this. So we're definitely going to be doing like a pass, especially when multimodal comes out and it's more widely available. but it is going to be so cool to see how much more you can do. But I think this ultimate goal of exploration and experimentation and patience is where you can start to push and pull these systems into ways in which they can help you and that you didn't think are possible. And I think that this is where I get really excited and that, where we're doing this work, that there is this opportunity to keep trying new things and there are so many great like applications out there, but what I love about our prompt library and the work that we're doing is that this is you get to be you are the actor,
Totally.
you are the driver, you are the expert, and then what you're doing is you're using the AI to support your context, your unique needs. Because I love it so much in terms of, so like Carl was saying, like you're doing a PD session for university staff, and I think it's so great to like, you can then say like, it's going to be like only for our context. It's going to be an ELA version or like an English version. There's going to be a research version. There's going to be an adjunct version. And that's where it gets really, really interesting in terms of how it's going to be something that's really powerful for you. And so it looks like we are the prompt one. It's so funny. The apples to apples, we'll get that to you in a second, Amber. But if you just go to our website and it's going to just be prompt library collection to apples, but we'll get that out there. But I think this is where we get to the idea really fast that this is something that there's so much power in your expertise. Like your expertise is the power here.
I think it'd be really cool actually, because that, that is the fun part, like creating the examples, but then we remove everything and test it so that it's easy for people to access. And I actually think it would be really cool if people wrote in with the ways that they use it, if they do. So if people use the apples to apples, or if they use the Jeopardy, for however they use it, whatever they, whatever subject or topic, that would be really cool, because that would also give us a sense, I think, of how people are using it. Or yeah, that would be helpful and very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna throw this one into this guy. There we go. Hold on. Here you go. So maybe what we'll do is like we'll actually do a piece where we'll put something out there in which we can have like some work together where we can look at actually having and like brainstorming like these different ways, because I think this is where we get so excited about this work is that it's so funny, I actually just put the wrong one in, but anyway, we'll send you the apples tomorrow. But I want to say, like, we're coming up on time, and so first of all I just want to say thank you to Callie, who was very nervous before she came on today. And I keep putting her in situations that she's a perfect example of that, like believe in growth mindset in yourself, because this is something where I don't think that this was on her bingo card for this year of working with AI for education, helping build prompts. But thank you to Callie for joining and sharing your wisdom. And we'll continue to create great prompts. Secondly, I want to thank everyone for joining. We have so many great people, and thank you for your patience as we continue to work. And again, thank you so much for your patience, that little bit of technical at the beginning. And I just want to say, have a good night or morning or middle of the night. Please go to bed if it's the middle of the night. And we'll be posting this tomorrow, following up with an email so you can share with your colleagues and rewatch if you'd like. And always connect with us. We really care about you all and hope that this is helpful for your practice. But thanks to everyone here. Thanks to Dan who helps, and thanks to Callie for being such a good support. Thanks, everyone.